How we doing, everybody? It's Wardy here. It's May 3rd, 2025, and while the Amazons had their game rained out today in St. Louis, we do have some breaking Mets news to get into that has dropped over the past hour, having everything to do with their bullpen configuration, as finally, Dedniel Nunez is being called up there from AAA Syracuse. I want to see all your initial reactions, excitement, and everything in between in the comments down below, so thank you guys so much for doing exactly that, because we're going to break down where initially does this report stem from, how credible is it, and ultimately why Nunez is coming up now with this Mets team as we get into these Sunday matchups, barring changes, along with what is going to happen with Nunez going forward here with this Mets team throughout the course of the 162. Who is Dedniel Nunez? What are the Mets getting? Everything in between is what we're going to break down right here, right now. So thank you guys again for chiming in. We appreciate it. Folks, let's get into this and let's get into where, again, all this news initially stems from, because as many of you guys know, Dedniel Nunez is a guy that we have been wanting to see back with this Mets team and is now finally coming to fruition. And this news comes from initially here from, yes, Mike Rodriguez. Mike DePortes, the same man who had a lot of the key sources this past offseason on the extension front, including guys like Vladimir Guerrero Jr., had a source there on Kyle Tucker, but we have yet to see that confirmed with premature extension talks between himself and the Cubs. But this makes endless sense, and this is credible, and here's why. Because Rodriguez not only hammered multiple extensions this past offseason where he was first on it, not just Vladdy's massive deal with the Toronto Blue Jays, but we also saw what we have there, not only just for Vladdy, but in Ketel Marte, among others. So he has had the credibility, really built that up this past offseason, and he certainly deserves credit for that. And Mike DePortes here, and we're going to see it official for the Mets within the next 12 to 24 hours, because as we know, the Mets now have a slated doubleheader, a split doubleheader there, beginning at 1:15 tomorrow there, this Sunday, against the Cardinals, where Blade Tidwell is towing the rubber for his Mets debut of his first start of his career. Then we have Tyler McGill for the nightcap at 6:15, and the weather doesn't look great this weekend still, so I'm curious to see if both games will get in. But because the Mets are having a doubleheader especially, they're going to want an additional arm, because you get that one extra player for the doubleheader, and the Mets were already expected to call up Dedniel Nunez after Blade Tidwell's start this Sunday, so this is just reaffirming exactly that, everybody. And let's talk about Dedniel Nunez and what exactly the Mets are going to be getting there in the veteran right-hander. I see veteran based on age, but not so much on the MLB ability, because he had his rookie season this past year here with the Mets, everybody. But as you guys can see, Dedniel Nunez, and I apologize, I went to the wrong slide here. Here we go. Look at what Nunez did this past season here for the Amazons against teams like Miami, teams like the Padres, the Braves, everybody and your mother. Look at this. 35 innings to a 12 to a 2 K per 9 to walk per 9 ratio. Absolutely fantastic. 48 strikeouts, a 2.31 ERA, and expected ERA right around the same. Dedniel Nunez was absolutely nails for the Mets last year, and he had multiple things working so well in his arsenal. Mainly, of course, you got that four seam, and you have the slide piece, that nice 1-2 punch that does damage, and he is in so many ways a mini Edwin Diaz, and that's why I've loved Dedniel Nunez so much, and I was really happy to see him blossom out of the Mets bullpen when he's been in the organization for a hot minute now. But as soon as David Stearns comes in as Pobo, he really maximizes what we have here in the farm. And Nunez is a guy that not only looks like a solid reliever, but could be one of the best high leverage options for the Mets this season. And they need him right now, especially with AJ Minter likely out for the season there, as we're still waiting official word on that front. Danny Young, to a lesser degree, the same exact applies there. So Nunez, after having a fantastic rookie stint last season, 35 innings, looking just jaw-dropping, because if we also take a look, everybody, just for a second, in the baseball savant numbers, I mean, absolutely absurd. He was in the 100th percentile in chase percentage, 100th in K percentage, close to 100th in whip percentage. Barrel percentage obviously got barreled hard when he gave up contact, but ground ball percentage was in the 90th plus percentile. Look at the expected ERA, expected batting average, and fastball velocity. Sits 96, 97 on the gun. It was topping out 99 on the heater last year, and he doesn't only have just the slider and the four seam, but that's just such a heavy part of the arsenal. He does also have the sinker and the change that he barely throws, but that 1-2 punch of the slider and the four seam plays up so well and was brilliant in helping even set up guys like Dedniel Nunez and Edwin Diaz last year. So to see Nunez now up with this Mets team, this is fantastic news, because we all believe that he is going to play up to be a true high leverage option for the Mets throughout the course of this season. The only reason why he pitched 35 innings for the Mets last year is because he had his season derailed there towards the end with injury, and that's why he had a slow ramp up in spring training. I wasn't back with the Mets yet until we find ourselves talking about Nunez Nunez here, right now. And we were all saying pretty much since the start of the season, when is Dedniel Nunez going to get called up? Like, hello, it would be great if he was back up with the Mets team over the past couple of weeks. So maybe you didn't like certain guys and closer spots or setup situations, whether it's Ryan Stanek not looking too hot, whether it's the Mets overworking some parts of the pen, and then, of course, back-to-back days when you don't say have an off day, it's hurting them. We're seeing this bullpen get exposed more and more now, so it's all the more important to have as many options, lethal options in that bullpen as possible. And that's where now Dedniel Nunez comes into play, everybody, because as we take a look at what he's done so far in Syracuse this season, across a solid amount of innings, he has himself a 3.48 ERA, but his K to walk ratio is where things are different. The K per 9 is still right around, north of 12 plus per 9 innings. That's fantastic. But the walk per 9 has been 6 plus. He has allowed a lot of base runners to get on so far in Syracuse. And some Mets fans have joked saying, oh, it's just because he's bored and knows he shouldn't be in AAA Syracuse. Whatever the reason might be, that did play a certain factor into why the Mets haven't called up Nunez up until now, or what you'll see officially announced over the next 12 to 24 hours. And that just has everything to do with getting him properly ramped up there that we're going to see there in the minor leagues, because he needed to make sure that he still got a good amount of innings, a good amount of bulk, because without getting Dedniel Nunez really built up in spring training, then leading into AAA Syracuse, he would have been a lot more raw coming back from injury, and then he would have been exposed, and a lot of Mets fans would have said, oh, Dedniel Nunez is a bum. He isn't the guy we thought he was, when in reality, he still is, but he just needed to be getting his proper ramp up there in AAA Syracuse. Now, there is a big question that is aligned with Dedniel Nunez, and this has a little bit to do with Jose Butto, mainly because himself and Butto, along with Reed Garrett too, were all standouts coming from the Mets bullpen the year prior that were just solely minor league options heading into then the 2024 season. Jose Butto was fantastic, being stretched from a starter to a reliever up until pretty much he got overworked there and then was batting practice in playoffs. Nunez was without question the most jaw-dropping reliever option the Mets had last year that they brought up there from the farm, and then Reed Garrett was nails throughout the entire course of this season for the most part, especially his brilliant start to the year. But looking at Jose Butto especially, there are a lot of Mets fans that have their reservations with Butto that don't believe he's going to be as reliable or as consistent for the Mets here this season. I wonder if you guys have that same mentality or different when we talk about someone in Dedniel Nunez, because, again, Nunez is coming off of an injury, was shaky there in Syracuse, especially with allowing a lot of guys to get on base. Also, in his last outing, didn't allow an earned run in over one inning, but did balk twice. Very bizarre. Regardless, though, Nunez is now up with this Mets club, and I'm absolutely pumped up. I'm feeling ecstatic to see him back with this amazing Mets team, because now to see what this bullpen can do, to have less situations where you have Ryan Stanek there every time in a closer role that isn't, say, Edwin Diaz, because Nunez can definitely come in closer situations for this Mets team. Look at the arsenal. It's a four-seam fastball that touches 99, and it's a slider that touches the high 80s to low 90s. He is so Edwin-esque. It's actually hilarious, but the big difference is Edwin has done this pretty consistently throughout his career now, leading to that $100 million contract, whereas Nunez is kind of just getting his MLB career started and could be a late bloomer in similarity to a guy like Huascar Brosman, because Brazo was 35, 36 years of age, but he's only been in the league for 3.5 years because he was a late pickup and acquisition by the Miami Marlins. Before that, he was playing in a bunch of different indie leagues and respective leagues there leading up to him eventually being noticed by the Marlins, and then the Mets traded for him this past MLB trade deadline in 2024. But Mets fans, definitely let me know your excitement level on the front of Dedniel Nunez, because what this ultimately means now for this Mets bullpen going forward is that they have a high leverage option. Now, what makes Nunez so fantastic is not just his ability to get righties out, but as you guys will see in this highlight right here, Josh Bell, not a problem. Look at just the nasty drop there on the slider. Nunez can get lefties out just as good of a rate as right-handers. Now, we'll see how that plays up on the consistency front throughout this all, but the entire reason as to why the Mets aren't going out of their way to try to bring in a guy like David Robertson, who I'm sure is ramping up, that we talked about a couple days ago, as a free agent option that is fantastic and is dominant against left-handed batters especially. So if you don't have A.J. Minter and you don't have Danny Young, all the more reason to have a guy like David Robertson back with this Mets team after he was awesome with us in the first half of that closer role in the 2023 season, leading up to him being dealt to the Miami Marlins for Marco Vargas and another prospect. Fast forward a couple of years now, Dedniel Nunez looks like he has the potential to be that D-Rob type pitcher for the Mets this season. But it comes down to health, comes down to consistency, and not walking everybody and your mother. Those are the things that we'll patiently wait and see how he does. And all I will preface to Mets fans that have level of reservations or are overly excited, please set yourself up where you're not going to be too overreactionary if Nunez comes in and he gets rocked his first couple outings. Because there's a reality that if Nunez is going to pitch, say, this Sunday in one of the games of the doubleheader, if not both, for the Mets, that, he might not look his sharpest. He might look really rusty as a guy who hasn't been in the major leagues there, in hot minutes. So let's just bear that in mind. Everything leading up to this game, his first outing there that we'll see sooner rather than later. The context is important for a guy coming off of his injury, and of course was a little up and down that we saw in Syracuse with allowing a good amount of guys to get on base. But needless to say, everybody, this Mets bullpen is adding an absolute weapon. And if Nunez can just pitch to even 80% of what he was last year for this Mets team, then they are in fantastic hands, because Nunez wasn't just good last year. He was amongst the league's best that we just relayed from all the numbers and the baseball savant statistics especially. He can be one of the better high leverage arms, not just for the Mets, but in all the National League this season. He just has to go out there and prove it like he did in the first half that we saw in 2024. So Mets fans, let me know all your thoughts on Dedniel Nunez returning to this Mets bullpen. What do you expect to be the makeup of this Mets bullpen over the coming days, as they have more moves that they need to make naturally, with a lot of guys there that are going to be DFA'd because they're call-ups for a day or so, because the Mets don't have a lot of off days. There's a blessing in disguise. It's that even though that, yes, you don't want a doubleheader the same day, you have to travel to then to the West Coast, to Arizona, to start a series the very next day. The one upside is that the Mets are getting a breather today. The arms are getting a day's of rest there, and that is never really a bad thing. So that's certainly not bad. But as we evaluate what other guys could be considered for this Mets bullpen, we know Austin Warren was called up this past day, so we'll see if he's still going to be in here and to what degree will he impact things. Jesus Cabrera was just given the call and didn't look great in his first outing that we saw, on a one run scored after he was taken out of the ball game, as Max Cran came in and gave up a sac fly right away. But Jesus Cabrera, Jeremy Hefner really likes his stuff. He spoke pretty glowingly of him that I saw in an article written through The Athletic with Will Salmon and Tim Britton just a couple days ago. Implore you guys to check it out. We referenced it on the platform array a couple days ago. But Mets have their options in the bullpen. Tyler Zuber and Rico Garcia sadly got absolutely, not Rico, but Zuber got rocked again in his latest outing, so I don't expect the Mets to consider him immediately out of Syracuse. Rico Garcia I like quite a bit, but he hasn't had the best numbers so far in Syracuse this year either, so we'll see what happens, everybody. If there is one arm to maybe keep an eye out for, it is certainly the video that we broke down earlier this morning in our latest, not Big Mets Update segment, but actually a big prospect news segment, because Felipe De La Cruz, remember the name, flamethrowing southpaw that was just moved up to Syracuse. And what he did in Syracuse was nothing short of jaw-dropping in his Syracuse debut just a day ago. We broke it all down. He is another option for the Mets to consider. And who knows, everybody, maybe Dedniel Nunez is just the start of multiple arms that the Mets are going to bring up from Syracuse this year due to injury or inconsistencies that are as lethal as Nunez, if not potentially better. A lot of upside with the Mets on the farm right now. The pitching is cooking from St. Lucie all the way up. And now's a time to be really excited about the plethora of options that the Mets, David Stearns and Carlos Mendoza, has the luxury of considering each and every week. Thank you guys again for watching. Hit that like and subscribe on your way out. And as always, no matter what, let's go Mets, baby. Peace out, everybody. Have a great one.